Hey there, welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. This week I'm going to talk a little bit about gear, equipment, if you will, partially because I had several requests to talk about encumbrance, which this kind of ties into. Maybe we'll do a video about that at some point, but this is more about the use of gear, partially because I've just seen a few things kind of pop up lately, and also because I've had it in my notes forever to talk about this. So this morning, as I was leaving my house, I was going to go for a walk in the woods. I have like some nice paths near me. And before I left, I went over and I grabbed my pocket knife. I grabbed a bandana to go on my hair, so, bugs and ticks and such. And I grabbed a bottle of water. And I walked to the woods and thinking about what I was going to talk about today. And I thought, wow, the equipment that I took with me could aid me or will aid me if I run into different types of situations out here. Now, I can say that I take my pocket knife with me whenever I take a walk in the woods, and in the 10 years or so that I've been walking in the same area, I've probably actually used it maybe once or twice for something random, so it's not like I need it all the time, but I take it partially out of habit and partially because you just never know. And I feel like if you are going on an adventure, if I'm going to go camping or hiking, or even if I'm going to go into the city for the day, I think about what might I do today? What things might I need to make my day successful? And I'm going to take those things with me if I can. Adventuring can be the same. I think that the idea of choosing your equipment is very much what we'll call player skill. That is to say that if you don't take a coil of rope with you, and you encounter a place where rope would be useful, a well that you want to descend down into, and you cannot explore it, well, the next time you go back to that dungeon, or the next time you explore anyways, you're going to take a coil of rope with you. You'll learn. Now, you could say your character should learn, or they might know this, but I think that part of D&D, and this is what makes RPG such an interesting thing, there is this meta level to the game, right? You as a player have certain skills. And yes, at some point, it reaches weird areas where it's like, I'm going to make gunpowder because I know how to do it. Maybe that's going too far. The idea of solving puzzles or overcoming obstacles, using things in the world, using your own inspiration, if you will, is a big part of the game for me, and a big part of how I like to play the game, and a big part of how I like to run the game. I am all about allowing the players, or letting the players, or wanting the players to find something in the world that will help them solve their problems, and not something, as people sometimes say, on their character sheet. And usually when people say that, because your gear is on your character sheet, they mean like some kind of skill roll, right? You can do both things, and really you should. I don't take this like firm, this is the way to do it. There's always going to be exceptions. You're always going to do things differently. But one of the things I love is when you can, especially as a player, but as a DM as well, when you can just find that one item that works for you, right? You decided in your backpack, in the precious space you had, to take this thing with you, a small mirror. Now you can use it to look around the corner, or to reflect light, or to do something, right? I use my mirror to make a distraction so the orcs look the other way. That kind of thing, right? You can become creative with the gear. Role-playing, right? Playing the role of your character in that situation with the stuff they have. So I talked about at the beginning that I've seen things lately. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I try to stay positive here, as you probably know. I'm going to talk about a few things that people do put in games and the reason why I don't love them. I think that these things, all of them actually, are good for maybe one-shots where you just want to sit down with a pre-gen or roll up a quick character and play, and you don't really care beyond that. But I don't love them for long campaigns. So the first one I want to talk about is what I call quantum gear. There was I believe it was the first version of Hero's Journey, where effectively, and I haven't read it in a long time, so I might not be getting the rule exactly right, but basically you had slots that I think you must have paid gold for them, and they took up encumbrance, and these slots were kind of like quantum gear. That is to say, you didn't write a coil of rope, you just wrote gear, or light gear, or something like that. And then when you got to a location and you needed something, you'd be like, oh, it'd be useful here? A coil of rope. I have one. And you would write it on your sheet in that spot. People seemed to really embrace this at first, although I don't see too many people using it now. Let me know if you've ever used anything like this. I immediately was like, what? No. Like the choice to bring a coil of rope or a flask of oil or a mirror or rations or some extra gold to bribe the guard is part of me playing the game. Like I only have so much space on my character. What I take with me is important. Do I bring a 10-foot pole? Or maybe instead I bring a pike, which is longer and can be used as a weapon, right? These are things that I can figure out and learn as a player to shape the way I play my characters. And this is something that I just didn't really like. I don't like the idea of it. Of course, I make fun of it and say, oh yeah, well, I suddenly need a galley or a spaceship, right? I mean, obviously you probably can't use it for that if you read deeply into the rules, but I just think it's kind of funny. That being said, on the other end of that, as a kid, my favorite magic item, and probably still is the Robe of Useful Items, because that gives you the ability magically to do that. And that's amazing. You've got this robe, right? And you've got a rowboat on it, or you have a ladder, or you have a set of dogs or some gold or whatever it has. And that's super cool. And it's a magic item. It makes it so it's something special. If you can just do it anyways, well, I spend 50 gold and I have 5 slots and I'll just have whatever I need for the adventure. That just seems to take it away. Now, again, I think for a one-shot, this is probably fine. Although the way I prefer to do it is I make pre-gens with some basic gear. And then I say, if there's anything else you think your character would have, take 5 minutes, write it on your sheet now. Kind of like right after I do the intro to the adventure. So they have a little bit more info. So like I might pitch the game as, oh, you're going out to raid this tomb because you saw blah, blah, blah. And then I'll do the intro. The tomb is peopled by undead. Would you be peopled by? And then I'll be like, if there's anything you want to take, and if somebody's like, I'll take a wooden cross, I'm going to take garlic, I'm going to take holy water. Okay, yes, put it on your sheet. That's kind of how I do the quantum gear. You make the decision before you go out. Because again, it makes the players feel good. Now, I know that people are going to say, well, it's terrible because what if you didn't take the rope? You can't do the thing. Yeah, exactly. And you'll come back. That's the idea, right? The game goes on. The game is a campaign, which is one of the reasons why I say some of these rules I'm okay with if it's a one-shot. Okay, another one which was just talked about recently on Questing Beast is, I can't remember what they called it, but basically I've seen it a million times before, called the loaded die, where basically you roll a d6 and mostly everything on the d6 does something. And one of those things is spells or torches burned out. I do not like this. I don't like it because, again, it takes away the player choice to light a torch versus a lantern, to take a certain number of torches, to decide, I've been burning my torch for 4 turns now, it's going to burn out in 2 more turns, so I'll drop it down the well so we can see what's down there. This is a player choice that is removed if your torch can just disappear anytime. Same with spells. You know a spell duration, so you make a choice. My shield spell lasts this long, so I'm going to cast it here, knowing that I have this much shield spell, right? I wait till I hear something on the other side of the door before I cast it because, again, I want it to last a certain amount of time. Whereas if it just can go away anytime, like I wouldn't cast it until right before I need it, thus wasting a turn or a round, or however you want to say it, of combat while I'm trying to cast a spell, which I might not even be able to do because I might get moved on too quickly and killed. Again, that's a player decision that they can make. I'm going to cast the shield spell after we listen to the door because we know there's an enemy here. This is a player choice that is removed if I cast a shield spell after we listen to the door, we open the door, you roll that d6, and they're like, oh, your shield spell ends. And you can say, well, we'll modify it, it'll last X number. If you have to modify that rule at all, then it's not working. So for me, it just doesn't fly. Now, I like it for wandering monsters. I even like it for weird dungeon effects, right? You could say, a massive wind blows in might blow your torches out, but not your torch just goes out and I need another one. Because again, does torch burnout mean that it's no longer able to be lit because it's run out? I'm assuming that's the point, and I just don't care for it. So on that same note, and this is, and I haven't actually used this rule, so I'm going off just my gut here. The game, which looks really cool, and I'm going to be in a game of it soon as a player, so I'll let you know how I like it. Shadow Dark, they use real-time stuff. So you cast a spell, and again, this is just my understanding, and it lasts, 10 minutes in real time, and you kind of time it at the table. I'm not exactly sure why this is supposed to be good, to be honest with you. I feel like it's more for the DM to track if it's trying to save tracking time. I feel like it is weird because sometimes things that take, it's a classic thing, right, in D&D. Something that takes 5 days to do, you do in 5 minutes. Something that takes 5 minutes can take 5 hours. That's just the nature of D&D. So I don't love anything that's happening real time. I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, of course, if you're a DM and your players are hanging out having this super long conversation on the other side of that door where they just heard enemies on the other side, you're going to say to them, hey guys, are you having this conversation here? Because you're on the other side of the door and you know there's enemies there. And they're going to move on, right? That's a very simple thing you can handle. You don't need mechanics for it. If you have been using this real-time stuff, I would love to hear about it. Like I say, I'm about to play in a game. Hopefully the campaign's going to start soon, so I'll get back to you on that. But on the surface, I just don't care for it. It doesn't make sense to me. And all of these things tie in, and the final thing would be usage dice, which I've talked about until I was blue in the face. Not a big fan of usage dice, because I think that players making a decision, a player knowing that, and you might call it meta, but a player knowing that a torch lasts 6 turns, a lantern lasts 24, that, this certain spells last for this amount of time, that this works this way, is important, right? They're casting that light spell because they know it's going to last, right? They're like, okay, we're going to cast a light spell here because it's an incredibly windy tunnel just below our torch. So we're going to cast this so that we know we have light for the rest of this place. And then when you're like mostly through the spell duration and you go, oh man, we're not through this windy place, we're not going to be able to light a torch, maybe we need to head back or do something else or whatever, you can make that decision. But again, light spell, you're 3 turns into it when it's supposed to last 12, and it goes off because you rolled a d6. It just doesn't work for me. Now, the fun stuff, right? That's the kind of the reason why I don't love that quantum stuff. Gear that's not on the equipment list is super fun. There used to be a website, I can't remember the name of it, it's not there anymore, so it doesn't matter, where it would roll up characters for you for BX, D&D, and you could choose to have, I forget what they called it, but like more organic equipment or whatever, and it would be stuff that wasn't on the list. Like you'd get like a brass bell, a jug of wine, some chalk, hair dye, a purple cape, a hat. It would have all these like interesting items that you would have. And our group loved it. We were constantly trying to figure out how to use this weird stuff, balls of twine and, just anything you could think of. The bell was a popular one. And so were the chalk. Those are probably the most common popular ones, but so fun, so good. I recommend, if you're just playing straight up OD&D or BX, to sit down, probably with your group or just on your own, or maybe look around for a list, or in the comments below, list a few items and we can share them. Stuff like that. Things that would be cool to have on your body. Ball bearings, chalk, as I said, even just charcoal dust, right? Things like that the players can use for cool effect. So let's just talk about chalk for a second, because I feel like, again, this is a good one. You get this chalk, these pieces of chalk. You can mark the walls in the dungeon, right, as you're going so you don't get lost. If you're not mapping or you can't map or you're whatever, you can mark it, or you're nervous your map's not going to be good. You mark the walls. You can crush the chalk dust down, right, and throw it in somebody's eyes. You could crush it down and leave it on the floor and then, past where you are and then come back an hour later. Are there footprints there, right? You can do all kinds of fun stuff with things like chalk. You could let players take things like different herbs and stuff. There's already garlic and stuff like that listed in like OD&D, right? What about aloe, which is great for burns? So maybe if somebody gets burned in an encounter, instead of using magic, you can say, well, you know what? I have this aloe. Can I rub it on the burn to reduce some damage? Let the players be creative. Let them think of ways to overcome things that are very, very fun and cool. And I mean, to the effect of, chalk, you could also take that burnt out torch, scrape some of the charcoal off and use that to mark things, right? This is really great. And again, marking walls with chalk or something is amazing in a dungeon because, if you're not used to old school games, because most monsters have infravision and you can't read writing with infravision. So they can see and walk around and not run into walls, and they can see you, of course, but without light, you can't see the markings on the wall. So if your DM is constantly having the monsters erase the the markings and they're not carrying a light source, bad DM. I'm joking, of course, but no, I mean, that's all part of it, right? Okay, what about various types of food? You get the classic adventuring party with piles of gold, and they're like, well, we don't want to pay, a gold piece to stay in the inn. We're going to camp out in the field and eat iron rations. Really? Would you do that? How about a block of cheese, some fresh bread, carrots, right? Honey. What about various things like that? What about spices, salt and pepper, things you can trade to people? These monsters who are living, you might negotiate with a goblin who's been living in a cave. They might not have access to these things. Giving the goblin honey might be a good way to win them over, right? And of course, you can take salt and pepper. You could throw it in somebody's eyes. You could rub it on a wound. You could put salt in water and do a rinse. If you have some kind of like a poison or something, you could allow that to like cleanse it somehow, or bug bites. I mean, all these things that you might be able to do, even if I don't know all the science behind that, but let's just say that you could do stuff like that. Let the players be creative. And if you insist on it being mechanical, base it on like their intelligence, or some training they had. They're a ranger. They would know how to do that. They're a magic user. They can roll against their intelligence. They're a cleric. They know about healing. So wouldn't they know about healing herbs? Something else we've been talking about recently on the Discord is dogs, right? Guard dogs, having them in your camp at night. You know, it's another D&D trope that, again, is super weird, that like everybody's constantly on guard, but to have a dog or two that will be alerted if something comes into the camp or they smell something, that could be really smart. Maybe you don't take them in the dungeon, maybe you do, but maybe you leave them with your horses when you tie your horses out. The dogs will probably run off animals. Because again, we have to think like animals, not D&D stats, where it's like, oh, well, you know, I don't know. Dogs will run off. You know, most animals will run if a dog starts barking at it, even a little dog, because they don't want a confrontation. They want an easy kill. So having guard dogs could be super useful. They could track. There's all kinds of different things. A hunting hawk. I think that's an AD&D they have those. I remember having those all the time as kids. We'd have our hawks. They'd go out hunting, so we'd have, you know, fresh meat when we were traveling across the field, because we thought about that. We thought about being our characters. We also watched those fantasy movies where they sat around a fire at night cooking up meat they found. They didn't eat some hardtack, right? They found a rabbit or they went fishing or whatever. So basically, get into the role. Think about how stuff brings you into the world. The equipment makes the world. And to that point, making custom equipment lists depending on your type of world or location is super fun. Let's say you're in a desert, right? Maybe there's different types of robes and stuff that you wear over your armor so you don't burn to death, right? Because it's so hot in the desert. Maybe you don't wear heavy armor. Maybe you have scarves when there's storms, right? Maybe there's some kind of means that people in the desert use to find water or to cultivate water at night when it's a little cooler or whatever by doing various things like that. Again, I'm not a survivalist, but I'm sure there's ways that people do this, right? Certain plants they can dig up and get the roots from, ways they know these things. You're in a desert world or a desert campaign. You might have the gear or the knowledge to do that. Let the players experiment with that. Let's say that you are in a jungle campaign. You're going to want to have machetes. You're going to want to have ways that they can, like, again, find different types of food. Maybe there's bananas or coconuts or various types of things like that they know are useful for them as far as eating and helping them get through and to navigate through the jungle. They might also have some kind of netting that they could use to keep bugs away, right? Or some kind of, some kind of thing that they can burn, not necessarily a torch, but that's super smoky that keeps away bugs, again, so they don't have problems. And this can be mechanical or not. You know, you can play with it a little bit. You can say, well, you know, you're going to want to have, what you don't want to do is this. Let's put this here. You don't want to go, okay, well, you got your camels, you head out in the desert. Well, you didn't take the scarves, so now you can't, make it and you all die in the desert. You're not going to do that. What you want to do is let the equipment be available, let them have it, and then occasionally, if they're going to do something risky, you foreshadow it or telegraph it, like we always talk about. Oh, you're going on a 2-week trek across the desert? Well, you're from this area. You would know you're going to want to take an extra camel or this special thing, and you're gonna be traveling at night, so you're gonna want to have this. You can navigate by the stars, that kind of thing, right? You let them know these items are available to them, and you make sure that they can get them at least at the beginning. That way, when they get to their destination at the ruins, 2-week journey out there, and then the rust monster destroys something or something kills their camel or they lose the way to do, now they know they're in trouble, and now you've created a survival scenario. What about a seaborne adventure? Or just one where it rains a lot, right? Like oilskins are super important. I always ask for one of those when I'm a player so I can wrap things up in it to keep it dry, like your spell book, right? Or little chests to lock things in with a lock on it. Or cast wizard lock on it, right? Nice. You have your little chest, put your spell book in, wizard lock. Ain't nobody getting in there without dispel magic. Now, yes, they could probably smash it or burn it, but now they're going to ruin what's inside, which isn't good for you, but at least they don't get it. The other thing that's really fun, and we did this in the Hyperborea campaign, was they traveled someplace that was more Arctic. So they had to prepare for it. They had to buy, heavy furs to wear. They had to get dog sleds. And you make that part of the adventure, part of the coolness. Get the idea in the head, the vision. This is what we're doing. We're making this Arctic trek. We need to take this. And again, you can have knowledgeable people, sages and stuff, be like, hey, you're going to need X number of dogs for this long. And they can make a choice if they want to take more or less based on, how much risk they want to take, basically. And you want to make things risk reward as always. So a fun thing that happened in a campaign of mine not that long ago was there was this trapdoor that the party had dropped down into in front of this temple. And in the whole bottom part was like, there was some ghosts down there effectively. I'm just going to keep it basic and say they're ghosts. These ghosts were completely unable to pass through daylight. And what happened was, and the way the party discovered this was, they basically got attacked and they had to retreat back up, but they could see down below the shaft of daylight, right, where the undead just couldn't enter. So they were like, oh, interesting. You know what? We're going to leave the place and go back down to the village below, and we're going to get some mirrors. And they did. They trekked back down. They had some large mirrors made, polished up stuff. It took some time, but they spent money. And, we had a couple of little other things going on while they were doing it. Then they went back to that tomb. They set themselves up a set of reflectors and basically made a path of daylight through the thing, went all the ways up to where the treasure was, took it, and walked right out without fighting any of them. That's clever use of gear. You've got to allow for it. The players have to know that they're going to have a chance, and you got to make the gear available. Make it matter. Don't have quantum gear. Don't have gear that people don't care about because they can't control it. Well, I don't know when my torch is going to burn out, so who knows, right? Let them know. Let them be part of the game. So that's how I love to use gear in the game. I think that it's really, really fun, both as a player and a dungeon master, to allow that to work. Let people use the stuff in the environment. And you might occasionally have to get something on the spot, right? They might break a chair leg and use a rag to make a torch because they didn't bring torches. They might get a bundle of sticks and do it, right? There's lots of different ways they can do it, but preparing for the adventure, bringing it with them, and knowing they can come back with their gear to overcome this is player skill in my mind. Vancian magic also ties into that, but that's a whole other video. So I'll leave you here and just say, comment below what you think about this. Let me know some cool, fun gear, maybe based on different types of worlds or locations. Let me know some cool stories about what people have done in your campaign. Also, check the description below. You'll find a link to my Discord server, which I mentioned earlier, and also to my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. I'll talk to you soon.